Hello, this is the Awaken as Love podcast, and Anayza is speaking. And I'm grateful to have my dear soul friend Magnus Alberg again here with me. Hi, Magnus.
Hello, and nice to be with you again on this podcast.
Yeah, as I said before, I'm really interested in having guests on 2 or 3 times to really just deepen in on the topics we're talking about and feel more comfort and intimacy with these sort of esoteric and personal and transpersonal experiences of consciousness and love that
Mm.
we speak about here on this podcast. And so, a brief overview again. Magnus and I met, I think, about 3 summers ago in Sweden. I was traveling in Sweden for a summer, and we met at this like spiritual workshop.
Yeah, exactly. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of felt quite early on that we had a good connection, and we've been very close friends since then. Yeah.
Yeah, we
So,
have. And Magnus, you wanted to share a bit about yourself again?
yeah, I'm from Sweden. I am 41 years old. I've been on the spiritual path. Um, Well, it's hard to define. I guess it started as a child, but it's definitely started with an awakening experience when I was 17. And it's been a huge part of my life for the past 20 years, something like that. And it's been an ongoing journey of looking within, uh, finding truth, discovering who I really am, who we all really are, connecting with awareness, with going into the now, opening the heart, and discovering the divine also. And for me, it's been experience of God as well. I would. It's not everyone is comfortable with the word God, but for me, it's a word that describes quite clearly what I have experienced many times. Yeah. So that's the short version of the introduction of me, I guess.
Thank you for sharing. Um, Yeah, is there anything you want to share with us about any experiences of love or God or yeah.
Yeah, I I was taking a today actually. I was taking a walk in the woods, uh, and an old experience of mine that happened perhaps 6 years ago, or something, 7 years ago. I'm not sure, something like that. It's not important. Uh, where I was also in the woods, and I suddenly have the sensation that someone was watching me, like there was a being looking at me somewhere. And I was started looking around, and suddenly I stopped looking at the tree, and a voice started to speak inside of my head, and it was the voice of God who said, "I am this tree, uh, looking at you through this tree." And then God said, "I all these trees because in this forest and everything else as well." So it was God telling me like, "I'm right here. I'm everything." And I remember that experience when I was walking the forest today, but I also realized that something I missed back then that I have connected with since then was that for me, all these years ago when this experience happened, was that it was still like a dualistic experience that I was seeing God outside of me. But I realized today that this experience was 100% an internal experience. That it was inside of me, like God was speaking from the inside of me, like it's and outside, but since then I learned that there's no real separation between inside and outside. It's right here within us. God is always present as you, as us. And also, yeah, I just came to think about it, like it's so easy to have an experience like that, but not recognizing that it's always an internal experience, because we're so used to looking at from the perspective of outside versus inside. But when we look closely and pay attention, we notice that it's the same thing. Yeah, it's just an experience I had today that I thought about. I felt like sharing it. Maybe we can take off from there, I guess.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. It's a really beautiful experience, and I felt my own longing for the woods. I love the woods, and when you're speaking about this inside outside, it reminds me of the practice of self-inquiry. And one way that I facilitate self-inquiry and other people facilitate self-inquiry is like when we're inside and we are coming to that sense of I am, like the sense of I am that's like within and also beyond identity. It's such a untenable and like intangible aspect, but it's a part of the guidance is if you hear a sound, is the sound really outside? Like to really listen to all the sounds and where are they really coming from? Do they not also come from inside of you? And I feel like that's and then of course, when I was guiding and Shaliz was guiding the self-inquiry, one of the participants really stood out for her. It's like that shifted something, that realization that all the sounds are actually coming from within me. And it's one of those type of things, and I think in Zen Buddhism they call it a koan, because it's the type of thing that's like there's these realizations where the mind can't grasp it, so something else become like something releases and comes like. And it really, I call it's a miracle, really. Like anytime we drop a concept and we are in the beingness of it, it's beyond. I think it's really beyond language, and it really does take those sort of moments and realizations to come into that experience of beingness.
Yeah, and I feel like when you discover and notice that the outside is inside and vice versa, like the concept of I and other collapses because they become one. So the I am is reduced to just am, like pure beingness. The I is dissolved. You still have like a sense of an I, but it's not a personal I. It's since there are no other and there's no separation, there's this non-personal I that's left, like pure being. And within this being, since there is no duality, there's really no conflict. So there's only love in that. There's no friction between two separate things, so to speak, I would say.
Yeah, I feel so. It's like that, it's that unity consciousness that kind of just permeates through all. And I feel like in some way that's like one experience. And then there's like the experience of unity and duality simultaneously, which I feel is another experience. And I feel it's like this, and so I feel complete since we live a lot of time in duality, this experience of unity is really necessary. It's like, finding water and during a
Yeah.
drought, and I think, we've both experienced in our process to not like this too might be a mirage, like like
Yeah.
everything, is the mirage in the desert, until it's like this inclusion, like this like deep inclusion of everything. And I feel like, that's the practice. Magnus and I sat in silence before we started speaking, and
Yeah.
I felt like sadness in my heart, and I also felt joy in my heart,
Yeah.
and I just like felt the intensity of feeling in my heart, and it's sort of like that's my personal practice. Now I realize it's just really it's the inherent paradox within any emotion, and like just how so much one is in the other, and it just creates this sensation of like immediacy and like potency and reality that's really of sense, but not of logic in some ways, not of linear like mind logic. And an experience of existence, and it moves. It moves with every breath.
Yeah. And one way to express it that my friend Niklas said, I think he said it many times, that oneness is made out of duality. It's a paradox in a sense, but it's very obvious when you experience it directly. But I feel like the challenge sometimes is when you have an awakening experience of this oneness, but it's, for me, it's not like I'm rooted or that I'm stabilized in this oneness experience. I go back and forth into duality and how to balance this, because you do remember that everything is one, but then you stand there and you're in conflict with someone or something, and to handle and to live the dance of life, so to speak, where you go back and forth between duality and oneness. And yeah, it's just an ongoing practice to reconnect with oneness over and over again, I guess. But I think that's like the challenge many people on the spiritual path are facing. But it's also a reason for that. It's an essential part of it, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't know. I don't know, but I wonder if like the idea we have of unity isn't always what unity is. And
Yeah,
that even if
exactly.
we are an experience of like non-duality or conflict, it's just, I feel like it's just practice of not judging yourself. And I feel like when in that state of allowance, we are both the finite and the infinite, or the eternal and the non-eternal, or I feel like we're
Yeah,
both like all the time, even if we are feeling separate.
yes,
I feel like as long as if we're like allowing that feeling is separate, I think that is unity. But I don't really know,
yeah,
actually. I just feel like it's
yeah,
always much closer than we perceive it to be.
yeah. And it's multi levels of it. I remember, I want to share another experience when you said that, because when I started off having my spiritual experiences, I had like, this the oneness experience of, like becoming one with the universe, and that kind of oneness experience. And I was chasing that experience after I had it, to reconnect, like feeling the oneness with the universe. But then I had a deeply profound experience some years later, where I realized that oneness is also togetherness,
Mm-hmm.
on a human level, like together in love. That's also a oneness experience. It's not some mystical experience of dissolving the body into the entire universe. It's also just being in love with fellow human beings and animals and plants and everything on a very human level that everyone
Mm-hmm.
knows. It's just, so it's very easy to get lost in like the very out there mystical parts of it, and they are also existent, and you can experience, have those kind of experiences as well. But it's not just that. It's also it's need to come all the way down into the human level, so to speak, and that's where it starts to be really miraculous. I feel like it's been here all
Mm-hmm.
along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
you're
feel so.
absolutely right.
Yeah, I feel so. I feel there's so much more grace in that perspective, and it's not somewhere we're going, it's somewhere we've always been and always have been and always will be.
Yeah.
And like there's that inherent like working as a healer, I know I'm constantly working in inherent paradox. So there's nothing to heal, there's never anything to heal, but we have just invested our attention into realities that keep us separate from that which is always present. And
Mm.
so as a healer, I just support people in reinvesting their attention into that which into the light that always is.
Yeah.
And but there's nothing actually, everything is always whole. Like, and so it's I don't know, it's just that simple grace that's like really pervasive. And I feel we have received so much harm from like this realm of humanity that we feel like escaping it is the higher truth, that like being, like you're saying, dissolving into the stars and like kind of being in that like high states of realization equates to enlightenment. But I think really being here, this being here and the beauty of the mundanity is
Mm.
perhaps is the enlightenment experience. Like as they say, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It's like another way of
Yeah.
saying that it just is like the daily experience of living. It's just
Yeah.
how we interact with it is really the the description rather than the action itself.
Yeah. And we always have to start right where we are. And if out of body experience happens, it happens, and you have that experience. But it's always available in this experience. And also, I really loved your expression, simple grace. I have to leave a comment on that. Simple grace. Just beautiful. Because there is always, when I have an awakened experience, so many times it's really awe-striking how simple it feels. It's so simple. I know I said it many times, like it's so close, it's so familiar, it's so right in front of us all the time, but we miss it, we forget it, we fail to recognize it. But it's also very good news, I feel, because it's also it's always very available.
Yeah.
Everyone can discover it. Everyone can recognize it. Everyone will recognize it in time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I was talking to a friend yesterday, and he said something that I really appreciated, which was that he said, it's so I'd rather take a ton of ayahuasca or bufo or combo than to just say how I really feel. And I realized I wasn't really doing the work until I was just saying how I really feel.
Mm.
And I like really appreciate hearing that. And it's once again not to dis disvalue any master plant medicines or anything, but like
Yeah.
the real work sometimes is just being extremely honest and vulnerable with ourselves and people around
Yes.
us. Like that is hard. It's really hard. We say it like, be honest, be authentic, but it's much easier to say in the embodiment of that
Yes.
practice. I think we're so automatically hiding our feelings, so like in default mode, we don't even realize how
Mm.
much we're not saying the truth. And to really
Yes.
take the time to realize our truth and express it is talk about a simple,
Yes.
it's a miracle. Like it's a really is, because it really is quite, it's quite devoid from normative culture and normative ways of existence. Like a lot of the time we're hiding. And so, and in a way that we might not even realize that we are hiding in plain sight to a degree. It's
Yeah.
really, yeah.
I totally agree, because being true is to be absolutely vulnerable, to stand naked emotionally and everything. And but the cosmic joke in a sense is that we, even when we are hiding and putting on defenses, we are actually standing naked and being true in a sense. We're just trying not to, but we cannot actually, it's actually impossible not to be true, but we can be in denial. We can be very much in denial of it.
Yeah.
And that's
I guess
suffering.
I guess that's why it's in plain sight. It's always in sight, like always.
Yes, it
Like
is.
what's true is always visible. It's just whether, yeah, like you said, so either it's conscious or unconscious, subconscious, but yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah, truth is true, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you just look at what's happening and what's happening on a global scale, it's like it's just things are just coming out, you know. It's like they say that thing of when if you're hiding something, or if you're trying not to express something, it comes out sideways, you know.
Mm.
So a lot of times
Yes,
it comes out in like in flashes of a certain emotion or an attack or something. Like it comes out in a response because you're just not being upfront with how you feel. And I feel like that's what's happening. Started happening in 2020. Like it's just like the
yes,
whole like, our whole collective consciousness are purging sideways because we haven't
yes,
been, you know, being direct.
yes. I feel so, and I've been aware for quite some years that I do feel that the frequency on Earth is rising, which will, that the darkness within us collectively and individually will start to surface more and more. And but this is also really good news because it's easier to connect, but it can be rough if we resist on the individual level and collective level. And I do think we see a lot of purging, as you say, on Earth right now. And I actually do think, I don't know for sure, but that it will escalate in the coming years. But it's going to be rough for many people, especially if you're not aware of what's happening. But I also feel that it's a great time to be alive, because it's a great opportunity. This purging we will come out of it uh, much more loving, much more aware of what's happening, much more aware of who we are and all of that. So it's I'm 100% personally. I have deep faith that God is under control. God got control of this. We don't really need to worry. I mean, it's taken care of. It's already taken care of. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And I feel like it can happen a lot quicker. Like if we choose that, you know, choose that timeline, if we choose all the darkness, that it's not a problem. Like we can't actually perceive light without dark. Like, and really
Yeah.
we can't really perceive the wholeness of our being without acknowledging the darkness and the shadows of our
Mm.
being. And I really feel there needs to be a deep restructuring of how we understand our own humanity and our own divinity.
Yes.
And we I do feel like we live in a conscious state of so much repression, and that's why we see so many outbursts of violence and like not nice things. And when we really start to realize like this revealing of the dark is like the revealing of so much of our own selves. Like there's an empowerment, there's an acceptance, there's an approval, there's a capacity and possibility of humanity that can expand in light and love. But it's not because fear and darkness is eradicated, it's because we too love those parts of ourselves, and we too
Yes.
accept those parts of ourselves. And in that, they don't have to rule from behind, you know.
Mm.
They're not unconscious, they don't like they don't have to dictate our realities. Instead, we are like sovereign and aware and able
Yes.
to co-create like with all parts of ourselves and our parts of ourselves, because we contain multitudes, and then
Yes.
also each multitude co-creating with other multitudes of other human ecosystems that we all are. And I feel like, we really only inhabit like a fraction of the consciousness that we have the
Yeah.
capacity to. And and this is just one part of inhabiting more, which is just the
Yes.
understanding that we too are the dark, and that we cannot
Yeah.
exist without it. Like we just are
Exactly.
not.
And it's not about a war against the darkness that some spiritual people are involved in. It's not that, in my understanding, because I think this what you talk about now is so vital and important, because a lot of people on the spiritual path, it's really hard to grasp, like, how can there be so much terror and violence and suffering in the world? Like, if there is a God, why is all that here? And it took a while for me to really grasp why all this seemingly dark, because it's suffering is real. It's really, everyone knows suffering, and it's awful, and it's also a type of disguised love. And when you start to realize that the suffering itself opens up the possibility to a greater love, the unconditional love, the love that can embrace even the ugliest of the ugliest. When you have a heart that can love everything that's going on in the world, all the suffering, all the ugliness, it's a love way more vaster and great than just loving what's already love and light, So the suffering actually invites us to a greater love. And when you realize that, you see that suffering was actually, in a way, grace. And it can be really hard to understand that, because suffering is so painful, and we don't want it. But it's slow process. We can learn to understand that it's actually grace, that because it teaches us an even deeper and greater love, and it's all worth it in the end, I would say. Yeah, but I do understand, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't help the suffering and we shouldn't stop wars, of course, because when you wake up to this greater love, you change, you transform the suffering, because it's played out, you don't really need it, you have already opened up to that love. But you don't reject the suffering, you don't hate the suffering, it's not that type of transformation. It's not, you don't fight it, you embrace it, you take it all into your heart and you love it. And that's perhaps the biggest blessing I had out of my spiritual journey, is when that realization dawned on me, because it's so personal, because it's actually, because it's about your suffering, my suffering. When you realize that my suffering is grace, my suffering, I can love my suffering and be a greater being. It's so beautiful when you start to realize, then you can heal, really heal, truly heal. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. I think it's super important.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, that if there is a secret to healing, it's love. I mean, I don't know if there is a secret, but if there is, it's like opening the heart to love, and like you heal. Like maybe you don't realize it right away. Maybe you have to practice what it means to keep opening your heart to love. But really, the parts of ourselves that we have rejected and deemed unworthy, to love those parts too is to change. It really does change our nervous system. It changes our like a systemic mapping within our brains. It changes our energy. It creates a spaciousness, because I feel like a lot of times we are in a contracted, like, fight, flight, or freeze response. We're in a war response, which keeps us in like shut down, contracted state
Mm.
of fear. But when we welcome love, like, love has an expansive quality to it, and it has a
Mm.
relaxing quality to it. And then
Yes.
even when we love the parts that feel contracted or fearful, then it's like a welcoming, like, oh, like, this part of me is too welcome. This part of me is too welcomed. And then that really is like all of healing. Like, to me, like, it's just doing that. It's just practicing doing that. And then you'll meet more of yourself that needs to be welcomed. And then you just keep, and it's just like this continuous process of welcoming yourself
Yes.
to yourself
Yeah.
through love. And I honestly, like, you don't ever need to see a healer if we just like, I mean, I'm like, that's funny, because I'm like, is that, I mean, that's literally all. And then there's details, right? There's like details of that. There's like details from our own ancestry, our own inner child, our own cultures that are unique. But I feel like those details, they are important, but they're not as important as we may believe them to be. Like, if
Mm.
because I feel like there's a universal code that embraces all of the individuated ones. And it really is just this practice of love. And you said worth, like, you said it really is worth it. And worth, I feel like self-worth has been really present for me. And I think
Mm.
it's really present in this, is just like feeling that we're worthy. We're worthy of that love, and we're worthy of that healing, and we're worthy to be whole. And
Yes.
I feel like it really is that deep belief of, like, knowing ourselves to be worthy, like, to be
Yeah.
worthy of the miracle of change.
Mm.
And even, and like, in some ways, regardless of what has happened in the past. And, like, it's not regardless of what has happened in the past, because it's not like like, atrocities have happened on this planet, like deep violent atrocities.
Mm.
And in some ways, it's kind of, there's like a paradox. I can feel my brain being like, how, because it's not to disvalue the fact that pain has
No.
been inflicted, but it's really to recognize that it is pain. Like the atrocities happened because that being was in pain, and then the being
Yes.
received pain, and then pain was being bred. We're just breeding pain. But that's
Yes.
not, but there's also, like, love and wisdom within that pain. And, like, when we recognize that, and we can accept, like,
Mm.
the pain that we perpetrated against our family was, and is the same, is like the pain that was felt within us. And and it's like the one, like, we're in like one pain, and so we're like in one love. It's like this like one experience, and just it comes out in so many different tones and textures, depending on your cultures and depending on the parts of the world. But it really is the same energy, just like moving in different ways.
Yes.
It's, yeah, I really went into, I felt like a tangent,
Yeah.
like.
And actually, that love that you're talking about is the only thing that really exists. Everything is that love. It's just different facets of it.
Yeah, even the pain is a facet of that love, which
Yes.
is,
Yes.
but yeah, yeah. I mean, I really feel that to be true.
One
I
way
really,
to express it that can be helpful, I guess, for people is that you feel pain, your unhappiness is a sign of your self-love, because you feel unhappy because you want to feel happy, and that is self-love. That you want to feel better is self-love. So your unhappiness reveals your self-love. It's already there within you. Did you
hmm
catch that? That you
yeah, another way.
just yeah. So that's something that you can recognize, that just the fact that you want to feel good, that itself is your self-love. It's right there.
hmm And I do feel like the pain we feel, this is like more of another way. It's like a parallel way of saying it versus
Mm.
reflecting what you said, is that the self longs for the self, and like when we are separate from ourself, we're in pain. So many times when people, when it's like we're just longing for the love of ourself,
Mm-hmm.
and something has happened for us to feel separate from that, and I feel like so many of these acts we do, it's just it's a blind and wild attempt to return to ourselves. And so we think
Yes.
maybe if we have things, if we control people, if we dominate, if we like, there's this mindset like maybe I'll feel secure in self, but it's, it's a phallus, it's a false way of pursuing it. But it's just, it is, it is just this pursuit of like feeling secure and love of self. Like you're so it's and
Yes.
yeah.
And they are attempts to feel happy, even though they don't work when we walk, try to control the external world, but it's still coming from that source of trying to experience happiness and love. And when you recognize
Mhm,
that, you can, within that recognition, realize that I already possess this self-love. I don't need to
mhm,
change anything, it's already within me.
mhm,
I just need to recognize that I do love myself, otherwise I wouldn't want to
mhm,
feel happier. uh,
mhm.
so just
And like
drop
another,
the, yeah.
sorry, I need to interrupt you.
Yeah, so, but it can be hard to recognize this, even though I do know that sometimes you read something and you can kind of follow and understand, but it doesn't really feel right. So the thing to do here, I feel, is to like meditate on things like this, and go deeper into these statements, these guidelines, and they will start to integrate deeper and deeper, and become a direct experience. So practice is, I think it's really important to do the work, so to speak. Sometimes I guess people do have like spontaneous awakenings and stay there also, so it's, everything is possible. But as long as we don't have a spontaneous awakening, we can always do the work in the meantime, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I just wanted to say, like, another way of saying love of self is just being close to the self, like
Hmm.
being really close to your inner self and your inner experience. Because, and I feel that felt in some ways less abstract. Like
Mm.
sometimes I don't know, because anyone can perceive these words from in their states of understanding, but just to be really feel really close to your inner self and like recognize, where do you feel like you abandon yourself, where do you feel like you leave yourself, and
Yes.
just really feeling like coming back into intimacy with the self, and then remaining in
Yes.
that intimacy. And then I do feel like from there, life begets life. Like there is a vitality to being close to ourselves, and then abundance, and all of the things that we want and desire are there. I feel like they can be natural and automatic facets from just being with our, like being with ourselves, being in love with ourselves, being with ourselves, and that we don't need to like cajole or bargain or compromise or control to receive things from this material world. We can
Mm.
actually just know that they're natural responses from being in connection with our own self. And it is a practice, as you're saying. I mean, yeah, you can, some people have instantaneous awakenings and like are in that state. And I also feel like mm, there's so many nuances to awakening. There's, and like I'm avoiding saying the word levels, because I rather just say there's different facets of awakening,
Hmm.
and you can awaken to one aspect of the overall truth, and then there, I feel like life is encouraging us to grow, so there's always maybe more aspects we can expand into. They
Yes.
say, actually, like, I don't know, I've heard that Buddha and Jesus, reached one aspect of enlightenment, and they actually came back to the earth and reached higher levels of enlightenment in bodies where we do not know their names. That there's always like always more ways that we can be in the physical and non-physical. And I can perceive it, I can hardly talk about it because I don't really know, it
Hmm.
really, because I don't know if any one person can say that this is the truth. I feel like the
Yeah,
truth lives through our experience of living, and how it lives through my experience of living will be perhaps different than others. And that's what keeps things interesting and dynamic and alive.
yeah,
And I also feel sometimes we're all reaching for this like one state of being, like where we're safe and that we're like everyone else, where but no life is there. Like that's
yeah.
not life. Like that's actually death. Like that, I don't think dying is death. I think that's death, like just being all the same.
Yeah. I think I want to drop a quote again from my friend Nicholas, if that's okay. That's
Yeah, of
related to
course.
this. Like he said, if you have an awakening to one facet, like one perspective, and then you have another awakening from another facet, another perspective, but slowly the mind will realize that all these different, seemingly different awakenings will lead to the same thing, like the same truth. And eventually you will wake up to the ultimate truth that whatever awakening you have, it's always the same truth behind it. So I do think like that there can be an awakening that the type of awakening or the type of awakening experience doesn't really matter in the end, because you will realize it's always pointing to the same truth anyway, like oneness. Ah,
Mhm.
is this points to oneness and this points to oneness, and I feel that's true.
Mhm.
So maybe there is an ultimate awakening, but I don't know this for sure. I'm not that awakened, but
Mhm.
it sounds true. It has a good taste to it. I would say.
Mhm.
Who knows? Someone
Yeah.
knows.
Yeah, someone knows. Yeah, I don't know either, but I feel what you're saying, and it does feel true that I mean, it could, how to say it? I kind of think of it like eating. If you're eating food, like if you have a bowl of soup and you keep having a bite of soup, every bite of soup is unique, but also the same.
Yeah,
And then like this all soup, it's never not soup, right? So you're never not awakened. But it's
yeah,
like as you experience the bowl of soup and as you experience the awakening, it can have a facet of being different, but it's always leading you back to the one experience.
yeah.
Uh,
And I really think it can be vastly different experience of the same truth. Like we have a human experience of oneness, then we can have like this absolutely out there alien experience of oneness and or truth. So I guess that even though you have awakened to truth and realized truth, you can still just explore that forever, like because you can play with it in infinite amount of ways. So that and
mhm,
that's like the beauty of it. It's just
mhm,
you just keeps expanding, but it's I don't think that you keep understanding to a different truth. It's just a new facet of
mhm,
the same truth.
mhm.
That's how I see it.
Yeah, no, I feel that to be true. I feel that to be true. Or I feel that similarly because it does, yeah, because it does feel like there's infinite, like the if the universe is infinite, a consciousness is choosing to explore, won't it explore infinitely? I
Yeah,
mean, until yeah, until it's in its highest state, because of there's no deviation separate, there's like no aspect that's different than God
mm,
until that center point. Isn't it an infinite exploration?
mm,
That's my guess, and it doesn't mean that, yeah, that's my guess, like, so it's not, so it's just this outward, like outward into the ethers of expression and experience.
mm, yeah, yeah. I guess we'll see. Or yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's if it's separate from like what we do. Like, I think it's the same thing
no,
to living.
yeah,
I think it is living.
yes, yes, yes.
I think it is
I
just living.
agree. It's what we're experiencing right now, in truth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that's the loop language can have. Like when we talk about it, we can that speaking of it can make it separate from our daily life, but it is our daily life. Like it truly is
It
like how we
is.
feel every moment. It's how we feel when that soup touches our tongue. It's how we pour our water. It's how we stare at the trees. It's how
Mhm.
it's the first thought we have when we wake up in our beds. I mean, it really is that simple and intimate. Like it really is
Mhm.
that simple grace.
Yes, it's really that simple. It's. I heard expressed. I don't know who said it first, but it's closer than breath. It's so close that
Mm.
we miss it. I heard a lot of teachers like use language like that. That it's so close that we fail to recognize it because it's too close. It's too easy in a way. It's closer than breath. It's because it's who we are.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it's we get too caught up in the forms, the concepts, and the content instead of the whole of the experience, the context, perhaps you could
Mhm.
say. Yeah, the content
Mhm.
can be very seductive in a way, but it's
Mhm.
but the cool thing is it's possible to engage in the content but still be connected to the context, so to speak. So you don't have to like drop everything in that sense. Yeah, but it's a dance. It's a balance. When you find a balance, it's absolutely effortless. But yeah, I still go back and forth, closing in on the balance point, slipping away, and the dance goes on until the day I recognized that I was always balanced. I never left the balance point to begin with.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. That is it.
Yeah,
Well, as always, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure
yeah,
experiencing and exploring and remembering with you, Magnus.
yeah. And I can go on forever. It's just yeah, you can just tell me to keep quiet sometimes.
You know, I never do, but we
Yeah,
gotta
I
end it
know.
with this one.
Yeah,
Well, I love you, and I'm so
I love you too.
grateful. I'm so
Yes,
grateful that we get to explore this path together. And thank you all who have
yes.
listened to us. Um, I don't know what we just did, but we had a conversation.
Yeah, yeah, we did. We did.
And
Yeah,
so, I hope you experienced this conversation with us, because it was more than just words.
yes.
And so I really invite you into the experience of the context, I guess, not the not just the content, but the essence of the
Yeah,
experience. And as Magnus said, it's like to just to be quiet. I feel we the power of self-reflection and just being with the self, like being in the intimate spaces with ourself is so profound, and just taking a
yeah,
moment, taking a moment to do that. So thank you for spending some moments with us.
yeah. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful. I love talking to you. It's you bring out the best of me, I feel. So I'm very grateful to have you as a friend. Uh, a last word from me, I guess, could be when all else fails, go with love. That's something that I'm always trying to remember when I feel confused and stuff. I try to remember that go with love and you will remember again, and it always works. So that's the last thing I will leave this podcast with, I guess. My
Thank you so much. I
Yes,
love you.
I love you too. Thank you so much.